Billionaire hears young maid crying on the phone in hotel hallway. What he did next shocked everyone. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Please, you don't understand. I'm trying. Andrea's voice cracked the moment she heard the ultimatum on the other end of the line. Her hand trembled around the phone as she pressed it firmly to her ear. The building's corridor was dim, but the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed in a relentless hum. She forced herself to breathe, ignoring the stinging ache in her chest. You have until the end of the week, Ms. Morgan, the social worker repeated, her tone clipped, almost apologetic. If you cannot provide stable proof of income and suitable living conditions by then, we'll have to place Sierra in temporary foster care. Andrea swallowed hard. The hallway felt narrower than usual, its walls closing in. Tears threatened to spill, but she clung to composure. She couldn't lose her sister, not after losing both parents to a car accident 2 years ago. Determination flared in her eyes as she sniffed back tears. She ended the call abruptly, not trusting herself to speak another word. Her mind spun with worry. How can she prove she's capable of providing for Sierra when her second job just vanished? Working nights as a janitor in one of Manhattan's towering office buildings barely paid enough for rent. Now the clock was ticking, and fear gnawed at her every thought. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who often looked after Sierra. Andrea's shaky fingers clutched the device. Andrea, I just heard from the social worker. Are you okay? Sierra's asleep, but she's been asking about you. Andrea's breath came in shallow bursts. I'm not sure what to do, she admitted, glancing around to make sure no one else was nearby. They gave me 1 week. 1 week, Mrs. Chen. In an office just beyond the corridor, Nathan Cross sat behind a sleek mahogany desk. Though it was nearly midnight, he was still working, consumed by a new project for his tech company. His eyes shifted from the blueprint on his laptop to the faint sound of a woman's distressed voice through the partially open door. At first, he tried to ignore it. He wasn't one to eavesdrop, but the raw tremor in her tone drew him closer. Andrea slid her back against the wall, tears now slipping free. I have no idea how I'll pay next month's rent, she whispered into the phone. I lost that diner job. The tips were small, but at least it was something. And now, I can't let them take Sierra. She heard Mrs. Chen's quiet sympathy. We'll figure something out. But are you sure you can't ask your supervisor for more hours? Anything to show your income won't be cut. Andrea hesitated. Her current supervisor was indifferent at best. Overtime in the cleaning crew was limited, and she'd already taken every shift they offered. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, but there was no alternative. I'll ask, she promised, her voice flat. But it won't solve everything. Just then, the corridor door swung wider, and a tall man stepped out, frowning with concern. She froze, phone still in her hand. Nathan cleared his throat softly. I'm sorry, he said, eyes flicking to the tears on her cheeks. I didn't mean to interrupt. She blinked, embarrassed, hastily rubbing her face. It's nothing. I'll get back to cleaning. Her tone was defensive, as if expecting him to scold her. She knew who he was. Everyone in the building recognized Nathan Cross, though few saw him at these hours. He raised a hand gently, then spoke in a voice just above a whisper. I'm not here to report you. I heard. You seemed upset. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Is there anything I can do? Her chest tightened, shame mixing with anger. I'm fine, she murmured, stepping back. This is personal business. He nodded slowly, not pushing further. All right, if you need anything, I won't, she cut him off, trying to sound resolute. Thank you. Nathan watched her for a moment longer. He thought of all the nights he'd stayed late, drowning himself in work after his painful divorce. He recognized that desperate edge in her voice, the quiet agony of someone cornered by life's circumstances. She turned away, phone clutched tight against her chest, footsteps echoing as she hurried down the hall. After she disappeared, Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Something about the tremor in her voice stayed with him, prodding at his conscience. He returned to his office, but the numbers on his screen blurred together. Memories of his own struggles rose uninvited, long before the wealth, the success, the comfort. He closed his laptop with a decisive click. Sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. Meanwhile, Andrea yanked open the storage closet to grab a mop, her heart still racing. She couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that her entire world was about to collapse. The next few days would decide Sierra's fate, and she had no idea how to salvage everything. Her mind churned with half-baked plans. She would beg her supervisor for extra hours, apply to every possible job. She'd do anything, but the dread in her stomach warned that it might not be enough. At the end of her shift, she left the building with footsteps heavy as lead, never imagining that her quiet exchange in the corridor might shift the course of her life. Outside, dawn was just a faint hint along the horizon, a pale reminder that a new day was coming, whether she was ready or not. Andrea yawned as she stepped off the train in Queens, trying to push away the exhaustion. She clutched the strap of her worn backpack, her thoughts still tangled in worry. At least Sierra would be asleep. Andrea wanted to slip inside, check on her sister, and collapse into bed for a couple of hours before her next round of errands. Mrs. Chen was already at the door, eyes filled with concern. "You're home late?" she murmured. "Everything all right?" Andrea forced a weak smile. "I'm fine. Just had to stay a bit longer." She wasn't about to unload more problems onto her kind neighbor. "Thanks for watching, Sierra." Mrs. Chen waved a dismissive hand. "You know I don't mind." Then her eyes narrowed slightly. "But you look awful, dear. Have you gotten any rest?" Andrea shrugged, exhaustion evident in her drooping shoulders. "I'll catch up soon," she said, stepping inside. Once Mrs. Chen left, Andrea tiptoed into the small bedroom where Sierra slept. The 14-year-old's hair fanned out over a threadbare pillow, her face calm. Andrea's chest tightened at the sight. She had to make this work. She couldn't let them be separated. After a quick nap, Andrea woke to a phone call. Rubbing her eyes, she answered with a raspy greeting. The voice on the other end was a pleasant baritone. "This is Nathan Cross. I hope this isn't a bad time." Her heart jolted. She glanced at the time on her phone, barely 10 a.m. Why was he calling her at home? She scrambled upright, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Cross? How did you get my number?" She could almost picture him clearing his throat. "I asked HR for the cleaning staff contact list. I wanted to speak with you about something. Can we meet in my office this afternoon?" Confusion warred with suspicion. "Why?" she asked warily. He hesitated, choosing words carefully. "It's professional. There's a position I'd like to discuss, one I believe you might be qualified for." Her eyes flicked over the cramped apartment, scanning the overdue bills piled on the kitchen table. She needed a better job, desperately. But her pride still stung. Was this pity? She rubbed her temple. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cross, but Will you at least hear me out?" he asked, voice gentle. "I can arrange a time that fits your schedule. No obligations. If you say no, I won't push." She hesitated, thinking of Sierra. The desperation was real, and her time was running out. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll come by at 4. By late afternoon, she arrived at the gleaming building again. This time, not for cleaning, but for a meeting with its occupant at the top floor. Her nerves were frayed. She rode the elevator up, arms crossed over her chest, determined not to show weakness. When the door slid open, a receptionist greeted her with a practiced smile and directed her to Nathan's corner office. He stood when she entered, dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled above his elbows. The office was bathed in soft light, the massive windows revealing Manhattan's skyline. Andrea felt entirely out of place. Nathan gestured for her to sit. "Thank you for coming," he began, settling behind his desk. "I understand this might feel abrupt, but I have a role that needs filling, an assistant who can help manage administrative tasks, scheduling, data organization, communication, that sort of thing." Her eyes narrowed. "And why me? I'm a janitor here, remember?" He leaned forward slightly. "I did some background checking. I saw that you're studying administration at the community college. Your professors spoke highly of your organizational skills and work ethic. I need someone reliable, and I believe you fit the bill." Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to hearing praise about her abilities. "I can't say I'm not flattered," she murmured. "But this is out of nowhere." Nathan offered a small, earnest smile. "I realize that, let's just call it recognizing potential. The pay is considerably higher than your current position, and I'm willing to accommodate your class schedule." Andrea's pulse quickened. Higher pay could solve a lot of problems fast, especially the biggest one looming over her. Still, something in her bristled. "You overheard my phone call," she stated, crossing her arms. "I don't want charity." Nathan's gaze remained calm. "This is strictly business. I promise I'm not giving you a handout. I need a capable assistant. You need a better-paying job. Our interests align." She studied his eyes, looking for any sign of pity. She found none, only an odd mixture of sincerity and determination. A flicker of hope sparked in her chest. "All right," she said slowly. "I'll think about it." He nodded, apparently satisfied. "Take your time. Let me know in a day or two. I'll have HR draft a formal offer if you're interested." She stood, smoothing her shirt. "I appreciate the opportunity." With that, she turned to leave, her mind whirling. Could this be real? Could a single conversation change everything? As she stepped back into the elevator, her phone buzzed. Sierra had texted a heart emoji, followed by a simple request. "What's for dinner?" Andrea stared at the screen, heart clenching. There was more than dinner at stake now. This might be her last chance to keep her family together. Andrea sat at the rickety kitchen table, the hush of night pressing in through the apartment windows. A single lamp flickered overhead, casting uneven light across her open textbooks, a stack of dishware, and the official notice from the social worker. She had a shift in 2 hours, but her mind kept drifting to Nathan Cross's unexpected job offer. Sierra emerged from the hallway in oversized pajamas. She glanced at the cluttered table and then at Andrea's face. "You look like you're about to explode. Want some tea?" she asked quietly. Andrea forced a small laugh. "Sure," she replied. "Something soothing, please." While Sierra boiled water, Andrea tried not to feel guilty about how much worry she'd offloaded onto her sister. She cleared her throat. "How's school? Any trouble in math lately?" Sierra shrugged. "It's going okay. Mrs. Chen helped me with some homework. She said you seemed really stressed today." Andrea pursed her lips. Mrs. Chen was well-meaning but had a habit of noticing too much. "I'm fine," she said, a hint of tension in her voice. "Just juggling everything." Sierra carefully poured hot water into 2 chipped mugs. "You sure you're okay?" she pressed, eyes flicking to the pile of bills. Andrea looked away, her gaze landing on the bright letterhead from the social worker. "Not really," she admitted softly. She exhaled. "I got a job offer from that big CEO at the building. It's an assistant position, better pay." "But I'm not sure." Sierra blinked. "Why not? It sounds like exactly what you need. Andrea sighed. I don't want to be someone's pity project. He only offered it because he overheard me on a bad night. Sierra set the mug down in front of her. And so what? If it's a real job, then who cares how he found out you're good at organizing things? Isn't that what you're studying for? A pang of pride and defensiveness clashed inside Andrea. She hated feeling vulnerable, but Sierra's logic was hard to dismiss. I guess, Andrea mumbled, swirling the tea in her mug. It just feels complicated. Sierra reached out, her small hand gently tapping Andrea's. You don't have to prove anything by struggling alone. Her sister's words stung because they were true. Andrea nodded, swallowing back a surge of emotion. I'll think about it, she repeated, though the thought of refusing felt more foolish by the moment. Hours later, she was back in the silent corridors, mop in hand, the hum of fluorescent lights a grim companion. She found herself cleaning the same spot over and over, her mind lost in a haze of possibility. If she took Nathan's offer, she could keep Sierra by her side. She could pay rent without fear. She could continue her degree. But what if the arrangement made her nothing more than a charity case in his eyes? At that moment, her phone vibrated in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from an unknown number. I hope you're doing okay. No pressure. Just a reminder that the offer stands. Nathan. A swirl of emotions flooded her. Part of her wanted to ignore him, to maintain control. Another part was strangely touched that he would check in. She locked her phone without replying, her stomach twisting with indecision. Later, as she emptied the trash bin near the executive suites, she heard a familiar voice behind her. She turned sharply, heart pounding. Nathan stood there in the dim glow, tie loosened, looking somewhat worn himself. I didn't mean to startle you, he said, hands raised slightly in a gesture of apology. I'd just finished a meeting. Andrea bit her lower lip, wondering if she should bring up the job offer. Before she could speak, Nathan quietly continued. I want you to know I respect your decision, whatever it is. I don't want you to feel any pressure. Her jaw tensed. I appreciate that, she said curtly. She looked away, focusing on tying a knot in the garbage bag. Nathan cleared his throat. I'll let you finish. Good night. He stepped back, and she caught a glimpse of genuine concern in his eyes, concern that made her feel oddly exposed. Once he was gone, Andrea sank against the wall, the clang of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. All her life, she'd learned to stand on her own, to rely on no one but herself. Now, faced with an offer that could change her circumstances, she felt trapped by pride and fear. She picked up the trash bag and forced her mind back to the work at hand. But with every sweep of the mop and every squeak of the cleaning cart, she heard Sierra's words repeating in her head, Isn't that what you're studying for? Sometimes the hardest person to admit defeat to was herself. Andrea stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of a crisp button-up blouse she'd borrowed from Mrs. Chen. It was slightly loose around the shoulders, but it would do for the meeting she'd just agreed to. The morning light seeped through the apartment's thin curtains, highlighting the worry lines around her eyes. She was taking the leap, accepting Nathan Cross's job offer. Sierra cheered softly from the kitchen. You look awesome, she said, flipping a pancake. I bet you'll knock it out of the park. Andrea tried to muster a confident grin. Here's hoping. Her stomach felt like a twisting coil of nerves, yet determination flickered inside her. She had an opportunity. She couldn't afford to let pride get in the way of survival. Shortly after she hopped on the train to Manhattan, mentally rehearsing how she'd handle the meeting with Nathan's HR rep. The ride felt both endless and too short, giving her mind just enough time to overthink every detail. By the time she walked into the gleaming lobby, her palms were damp, but she kept her chin high. The HR representative, a poised woman named Becky, greeted her in a spacious conference room. "Andrea Morgan," Becky said warmly, extending a hand. "I'm excited to bring you on board." Andrea forced a small smile as she shook Becky's hand. "Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity." They went over paperwork, salary details, and a tentative schedule that would allow Andrea to continue her evening classes. Andrea's eyes widened at the salary figure. It was more than she dared to hope for, enough to cover rent, bills, and maybe even a few comforts for Sierra. She swallowed the lump in her throat, trying to remain professional. Midway through the meeting, Nathan stepped in. His gaze flicked from Andrea to the documents on the table, a hint of relief crossing his features. "Welcome to Cross Innovations," he said softly. "I trust Becky's taking good care of you." Andrea nodded. "She's been very helpful." Nathan took a seat, rolling up his sleeves. "I want you to feel confident here," he said. "We'll start by assigning you to our new project team. You'll help with scheduling, meeting notes, and some light financial tracking. Basically, anything that keeps the gears moving smoothly." Becky added, "We'll also need you to coordinate events occasionally, fundraisers or press conferences if they come up." Andrea nodded slowly, her head spinning with the scope of the job. "I'll do my best," she said. "I learn quickly." Nathan's eyes held a flicker of satisfaction. "I believe you." When the formalities ended, Becky gathered the papers and left, leaving Andrea and Nathan alone. An awkward silence settled. Andrea cleared her throat. "Thank you. Truly, I promise I'll work hard." Nathan's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I know you will, and for what it's worth, I'm glad this arrangement benefits us both. You don't owe me anything other than your best efforts." Andrea exhaled, grateful for his directness. "I needed this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan gave a small nod, then stood. "We'll get you settled at your desk. It's right outside my office." She followed him through the sleek corridors, passing employees who glanced at her with curious eyes. Soon, she reached a desk with a brand new computer and a potted plant perched on the corner. "It's not much yet," Nathan said, "but feel free to arrange it however you like." She managed a small laugh. "I'm used to working among cleaning supplies and mop buckets. This is already an upgrade." He cracked a grin, stepping back. "I'll leave you to explore. If you need anything, just knock." Alone at her new workstation, Andrea ran her hand across the smooth surface, letting the reality sink in. A swirl of excitement and apprehension danced inside her. Her phone buzzed. Sierra's text, "How is it? Already feel like the boss?" Andrea smiled, typing back, "Feels scary, but in a good way." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of introductions and orientation. She scheduled her first official tasks, scribbled notes on a small notepad, and set reminders on her phone. By the time she took a break, she realized hours had flown by without a single anxious thought about how she'd pay rent this month. Hope surged in her chest. Maybe this could work. At the end of the day, Nathan emerged from his office, looking as though he'd been buried in spreadsheets. "Ready to head out?" he asked lightly. "It's already past 6. Andrea blinked at the clock, surprised at how fast time had gone. She collected her bag and walked with him toward the elevator. On the ride down, she studied the reflection of them standing side by side in the mirrored doors, a young woman trying to hold her life together, and a man who, at first glance, seemed to have it all. She wondered what hidden burdens he carried behind that composed exterior. When the elevator chimed and the door slid open, they stepped into the busy lobby. Nathan cleared his throat. "Have a good evening, Andrea." She nodded, stepping away. "You too." As she left the building, warmth pooled in her chest. For the first time in ages, The future felt less like a threat and more like a promise waiting to unfold. Andrea's new routine took shape quickly. Mornings were spent at the office, tackling administrative tasks, fielding emails, and coordinating schedules. Afternoons gave her a narrow window to rest or study before her evening classes. Then 2 nights a week, she still clocked in for janitorial shifts, a necessary compromise until she felt secure enough to let go of the cleaning job entirely. Exhausting as it was, she refused to miss a single paycheck while the social worker's deadline loomed. Despite the fatigue, Andrea found an odd satisfaction in her new position. She enjoyed sorting through data, improving workflows, and ensuring that Nathan's appointments ran smoothly. It felt good to be recognized for skills beyond cleaning floors. Late one afternoon, she stood by the copy machine, sorting through an upcoming project briefing, when she heard Nathan's voice in the hallway. "Andrea, could you join us?" He was speaking to a small group from the legal department, apparently discussing a contract negotiation. Andrea hurried over, pen and notepad ready. The meeting was intense, with lawyers analyzing fine print details. She found herself jotting down key points, double-checking references. At one moment, a discrepancy arose in the paperwork. She calmly flipped through her notes, located the relevant clause, and clarified it. The lead attorney paused, impressed. "Nice catch," he said with a nod. Nathan's gaze flicked to her, a subtle glimmer of approval in his eyes. Andrea's heart fluttered, part pride, part relief. Maybe she really did belong here. After the meeting, she stayed behind to tidy up. Nathan lingered, pressing his laptop closed. "You handled yourself well," he remarked. "You've been saving me from a lot of headaches." She felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I'm just doing my job," she replied softly, yet inside she brimmed with something like gratitude. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. A text from Mrs. Chen, social worker, called. "Needs a status update. Please come home ASAP." A jolt of panic seized her. She had to confirm her new salary and living situation to finalize the arrangement that would keep Sierra out of foster care. Nathan noticed her startled look. "Everything all right?" She swallowed, forcing steadiness into her voice. "It's the social worker. I need to handle some urgent paperwork. Could I leave a bit early to sort this out?" He nodded. "Of course. If you need any official documentation from HR, just say the word." The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "Thanks," she murmured, collecting her things. While she rushed to the elevator, she dialed HR, requesting a letter confirming her employment and salary. It was sent to her email by the time she stepped onto the street. She could breathe again. By the time she arrived home, Sierra was pacing the living room. Mrs. Chen hovered near the couch, wearing a sympathetic expression. "They want proof you can pay your rent consistently," Sierra blurted, wringing her hands. "They said something about an inspection too." Andrea swallowed the knot in her throat. "I'll handle it," she said, voice firm. She quickly opened her laptop and printed out the employment confirmation. With a trembling hand, she dialed the social worker's number. Anxiety coiled in her chest as she explained the new job, the stable income, and the plan to keep Sierra safe. When she hung up, she looked at Sierra, relieved yet cautious. "They'll inspect next week. If everything looks good, space for you, consistent pay. They'll close the case for now." Sierra's shoulders slumped in visible relief. "That's great news, right?" Andrea forced a smile. "Yes. We just have to make sure the apartment is in decent shape." She glanced around the cramped, worn room. They had no choice but to make it work. Later that evening, after Sierra went to bed, Andrea sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills again. For the first time, she had the means to tackle them, even if it would take a few weeks to catch up. She thought of Nathan Cross, his calm voice, the way he looked genuinely pleased when she excelled at a task. A flicker of warmth stirred within her that in itself felt strange. She was used to viewing wealthy people with suspicion, certain they didn't understand what it meant to struggle. Yet Nathan seemed different. She shook off the thought, focusing on what mattered: survival and keeping Sierra safe. Love, romance, or anything resembling those emotions felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. And yet, there it was, a persistent flutter whenever Nathan showed kindness or trust in her abilities. Pushing the feeling aside, she opened her notes for class and tried to concentrate on tomorrow's lecture topics. She couldn't forget her primary goal: build a future where Sierra never again had to fear being taken away. Still, as she turned off the light, a faint current of hope lingered in the darkness, reminding her that maybe life was finally changing for the better. In the weeks that followed, Andrea settled into her role at Cross Innovations. Each morning, she greeted colleagues in the polished corridors, her shoulders held a bit higher than before. She'd officially quit her night janitor shifts, freeing more time to focus on her administrative responsibilities and her classes. Though her schedule remained demanding, the crushing weight of financial desperation had eased. One Friday, as she was finalizing a weekly expense report, she overheard voices in Nathan's office. The door was cracked open just enough for her to catch snippets of a tense conversation. She tried to ignore it, focusing on her spreadsheet, but a raised voice pulled her attention. "Look, Cross," someone snapped. "Our investors want clearer returns, not philanthropic distractions." Another voice, Nathan's, responded in a calmer, measured tone, though she couldn't make out the exact words. Curiosity piqued. Andrea returned to typing but kept an ear tuned. Soon, the door swung open, revealing a tall, stern-faced man in an expensive suit. He shot Andrea a quick glance, then strode away without a word. Nathan followed, his features tight with frustration. He halted when he noticed her gaze. "Everything okay out here?" he asked, trying to smooth his expression into something neutral. She hesitated. "I'm fine, but is everything all right with the investors?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "Let's just say, not everyone shares my enthusiasm for community outreach. Some board members think I should focus purely on maximizing profit." He exhaled. "I plan to set up a foundation for underprivileged students, offer scholarships, mentorships. They see it as a distraction. I see it as a responsibility." A flicker of admiration stirred in Andrea's chest. "You want to help kids who can't afford tuition?" Nathan gave a short nod. "Kids like me, once upon a time." He paused, then forced a small smile. "Anyway, how's the expense report coming along?" Andrea lifted the spreadsheet. "Just about done. I included the cost breakdown for next quarter." He glanced over it and nodded, seeming pleased. As he returned to his office, Andrea felt a surge of respect. The man had more depth than she'd realized. He wasn't just about making money. Later that day, she left work early to meet with Sierra's social worker for a final inspection. Anxiety pulsed through her. She had cleaned the apartment meticulously, rearranged the furniture to create a more organized space for Sierra's studying, and double-checked her pay stubs. When the social worker arrived, a faint smile played on the woman's lips as she inspected each room. "You've made significant changes," she remarked, noting the neatly stacked textbooks and the fresh coat of paint on the living room walls. Andrea swallowed. "I wanted to make sure Sierra has everything she needs." The social worker glanced over the documentation of Andrea's new job and stable income. After a few more questions, she finally slipped the files into her bag. "I'll recommend closing this case. Unless there are further concerns, you and Sierra are free to move on with your lives." Relief rushed over Andrea so intensely she had to steady herself. She showed the social worker to the door, then collapsed onto the couch with a shaky laugh. Sierra squealed, throwing her arms around Andrea's neck. "Does that mean we're okay?" she asked, voice muffled against her sister's shoulder. "We're okay," Andrea confirmed, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. No more threats of separation. For the first time in ages, the future felt secure. They ordered pizza that night, celebrating with Mrs. Chen, who joined in the laughter and relief. Joy buzzed in the small apartment. Andrea tried not to think about how new challenges always lurked around the corner. For now, she allowed herself to bask in the victory. As Sunday rolled around, Andrea found herself unexpectedly thinking about Nathan. She wondered if he felt as alone as she once had. She remembered the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension with the investor. Maybe he carried more burdens than he let on. That evening, her phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Nathan, titled, "Thank you." Brows furrowed. She opened it. "Andrea, I wanted to say I appreciate your dedication. This week was tough, and your efficiency helped keep things afloat. Thank you for understanding the vision behind the foundation and not rolling your eyes like some people do. Let's discuss some additional responsibilities if you're interested. I believe your perspective could be valuable. Regards, Nathan Cross." She reread the words, a warm feeling unfurling in her chest. Closing her laptop, she gazed around the small apartment. Sierra was safe. Their bond was secure. Opportunities were unfolding. In spite of everything, a part of her worried about complicating her professional life with personal feelings. Still, she couldn't deny the faint stirring of curiosity, and maybe something more. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities and new conversations. She resolved that she'd approach them with the same tenacity that saved her sister. After all, it was time to build more than just security. Perhaps it was time to build a life worth living. Early Monday morning, Andrea stepped into the office lobby, feeling a renewed sense of optimism. The social worker's case had been closed, Sierra was safe, and Andrea no longer felt like her world might implode at any moment. She took a steadying breath as she made her way toward her desk on the executive floor. Nathan greeted her with a nod when she walked by his office. "Good morning," he said simply, though there was an undercurrent of something kinder in his tone. She returned the greeting, noticing the faint circles under his eyes. He must have been working late. The day flew by in a blur of administrative tasks. As the clock neared noon, Andrea's stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since early morning. She was about to grab a quick snack from the vending machine when Nathan appeared, jacket in hand. "I'm heading to the cafe downstairs. Care to join me for lunch?" Andrea's immediate instinct was to say no. She was used to eating alone or skipping meals altogether to save money. But now her financial situation was better, and he was her boss, offering a friendly gesture. So she nodded. Sure. They rode the elevator down, exchanging small talk about the new project. Once in the cafe, they found a small table in the corner. It felt oddly comfortable, the city's hum just beyond the windows. Andrea ordered a simple sandwich, while Nathan opted for a salad. In the quiet that followed, she finally asked the question that had been nudging at her mind. "You mentioned a foundation. You want to help kids get scholarships. How are you planning to do that?" He set down his fork. "I want to create educational opportunities for students who lack resources, some living in underprivileged neighborhoods, some aging out of foster care. I grew up in Ohio, not poor, but definitely not wealthy. A scholarship changed my life." Andrea nodded. "So the investors aren't thrilled about that idea?" Nathan's jaw tightened a fraction. "Some see it as an unnecessary drain on company profits. But I believe the goodwill and potential talent pipeline it creates is worth every penny. Besides, if we don't use success to help others, what's the point?" She bit her lip, admiration flooding her thoughts. "That's really inspiring," she said softly. "I'm sure a lot of people will benefit." He offered a small smile. I'm glad you think so. Actually, I wanted your input. Someone with first-hand experience navigating obstacles might be able to shape the Foundation's programs more effectively than a room full of corporate suits. Andrea felt her cheeks warm. I'd be happy to help, if I can. After lunch, they returned to the office. The rest of the day saw Andrea juggling her usual tasks, plus some preliminary research for Nathan's Foundation idea. She found herself surprisingly excited, drafting outlines for potential scholarship criteria and mentorship initiatives. While she worked, a new sense of purpose stirred within her. As evening approached, Nathan tapped lightly on her desk. "Will you be here long?" Andrea glanced at the clock. "I have about half an hour left before heading home. Sierra's expecting me." He nodded. "Would you mind if I walk you to the subway station? I need some fresh air before diving back into spreadsheets." Andrea blinked. It wasn't typical for a CEO to offer such a thing, but he was her boss, and this was all new territory. "Sure, if it's on your way." They left the building together, stepping into the cool twilight. The city bustled with the usual rush-hour crowd, horns blaring and headlights cutting through the dusk. Andrea threaded through the crowd, Nathan beside her, distinctly out of place in his tailored suit among the sea of tired commuters. He broke the silence first. "I want to thank you for earlier. Talking about the Foundation, sometimes it feels like an uphill battle." Andrea managed a wry grin. "I understand uphill battles." His gaze flicked to her, empathy evident. "Yeah, I suppose you do." Then he cleared his throat. "Look, I know you value your independence. I don't want you to ever feel that your job is some kind of favor." She shrugged, though his words struck a chord. "I did at first," she admitted, "but you've been clear you see me as an asset, not a charity case." He hesitated, as if weighing his words. "Because you are an asset, don't doubt that." They reached the subway entrance, a swirl of people descending the steps. Andrea turned to face him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "I appreciate it more than I can say," she said softly. For a moment they stood there, the air buzzing with unspoken tension. It felt personal, more than a boss-employee exchange, but neither pushed the boundary. Instead, she nodded a good night, and he offered a small, genuine smile. "Get home safe," he said. "See you tomorrow." She disappeared into the subway station, heart pounding with an unfamiliar mix of gratitude and curiosity. Overhead, the city roared on, oblivious to the quiet shift happening between two people who were slowly realizing they might be more alike than they ever imagined. Andrea's budding sense of belonging was tested the next week when she overheard two co-workers whispering by the water cooler. She'd stepped out of her office cubicle to refill her water bottle and nearly froze in place when she heard her name. "Word is that she's got some special arrangement with Nathan," one woman said in a hushed tone. "He's never hired an assistant so randomly before." The other replied, "She's probably just a convenient charity case. She was a janitor here, right?" Andrea's face burned. She ducked behind a corner, fighting the urge to barge in and defend herself. Instead, she gritted her teeth, took a breath, and forced herself to walk away. She had work to do, and getting into a shouting match wouldn't help. Later that day, she found Nathan reviewing a marketing proposal in one of the conference rooms. She hesitated, then knocked lightly on the door. He looked up and waved her in. "Everything okay?" he asked. Noticing the tension in her features, she stepped closer, glancing back to ensure no one was around. "I just overheard a couple of co-workers talking," she said quietly. "They think I'm some kind of personal charity project for you." Nathan's jaw tightened. He set the papers aside. "I'm sorry you had to hear that. Office gossip can be vicious." Andrea shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "I'm not looking for an apology. Just maybe some clarity. It bothered me more than I expected." He paused, then spoke in a level tone. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You earned this position. You're proving that every day. If people want to speculate, let them. Eventually, your work will speak for itself. Andrea inhaled slowly, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. Thanks, she managed, her voice still tight. I just don't want to be looked at like I don't belong. Nathan searched her face, a flicker of concern in his eyes. If it helps, I can remind the department heads you're here on merit, not pity. She shook her head, pressing her lips together. No, that'll only make it worse. I'll handle it. He nodded, respecting her choice. After a brief pause, he added softly, Let me know if it escalates, okay? She mustered a small smile. I will. Then she turned to leave, heart pounding a little harder than she'd like to admit. Despite the office whispers, talking with him always steadied her. Over the next few days, Andrea focused on excelling at her tasks. She double-checked every report, improved scheduling systems, and coordinated a minor office event flawlessly. Little by little, she earned nods of respect from co-workers who'd initially eyed her with suspicion. Meanwhile, she and Nathan quietly worked on outlines for the new foundation. During lunch breaks, they'd meet to discuss scholarship guidelines, potential partnerships with local community colleges, and how to engage volunteers. She found herself growing passionate about the project, drawn to the idea of helping students facing hardships similar to hers. One evening, as they pored over details in Nathan's office, a phone call interrupted them. Nathan took it, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to concern. After a few short responses, he ended the call and pinched the bridge of his nose. Bad news, Andrea ventured. He exhaled, leaning back in his chair. My ex-wife, he said reluctantly. Our divorce settlement was finalized months ago, but apparently something about the property agreement is being contested. I can't believe this is still ongoing. Andrea noted the tension in his posture. Is there anything I can do to help? He gave a tired shake of his head. Thanks, but no. This is personal, just frustrating. I thought we'd both moved on. She watched him for a beat. He seemed more human than ever, weighed down by private struggles like everyone else. Well, she said gently, if you do need anything, someone to schedule legal calls or even just to vent, I'm around. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Thank you, he murmured. That means more than you know. Andrea gathered her notes, sensing he needed space. As she headed out, she paused in the doorway. Don't let it ruin your night, she said softly. Tomorrow's a new day, he nodded, eyes distant. Sure. Have a good evening, Andrea. She left the building, the crisp air hitting her cheeks. The swirl of complicated emotions, admiration, gratitude, and a deepening empathy made her pulse quicken. She wrestled with the realization that she cared about Nathan as more than just a boss. And if office rumors were already swirling, how would it look if she admitted even to herself that she was growing to respect, maybe even like him, far beyond a professional capacity? As she disappeared into the city night, she pushed the thought aside. One crisis at a time, she reminded herself. Work and stability came first. Whatever was blossoming between them, she wasn't sure she was ready to name it. Andrea's next couple of weeks were an emotional whirlwind. On one hand, her efforts across innovations continued to bear fruit. She successfully coordinated a small press event showcasing the company's future product plans, impressing both the marketing team and the board members who attended. Even the skeptical co-workers grew quieter when they saw her manage demanding schedules with unflappable efficiency. On the other hand, Sierra's teenage turbulence flared up. Andrea discovered that her sister had been skipping a few after-school tutoring sessions. While it wasn't a dire crisis, It signaled frustration and rebellion. One evening, Andrea confronted Sierra in the living room, the tension thick in the air. "I understand it's been chaotic these past months," Andrea said, voice trembling slightly. "But skipping tutoring, that's not going to help you catch up in math." Sierra folded her arms, eyes downcast. "I'm tired, okay? You're always at work or doing foundation stuff with Mr. Cross, and Mrs. Chen's nice, but she's not you. Sometimes I feel alone." Andrea's anger dissolved into guilt. She approached her sister and touched her shoulder gently. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm trying to keep everything afloat. Let's figure out a schedule that works better. I promise I won't leave you hanging." Sierra sniffed, nodding. "Okay," she mumbled, leaning into Andrea's embrace. Later that night, Andrea sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open to spreadsheets for the Foundation's pilot program. She stared blankly at the numbers, her thoughts drifting to Sierra. She couldn't fail her sister. The phone buzzing startled her. It was Nathan, though it wasn't unusual for him to call or text about work. "Hey," she answered quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. His tone was gentle. "I wanted to check in about the Foundation timeline. We have a meeting with potential partners in a few days. Are we on track?" She glanced at the documents. "Yes, I have the slides almost ready. I just need to finalize some budget details." He sensed something in her voice. "Andrea, are you all right?" She hesitated, considering whether to brush him off or be honest. Finally, she muttered, "I had a bit of a moment with Sierra. She's struggling, and I feel like I'm not doing enough." Nathan paused. When he spoke again, his voice was kind. "You're carrying a lot. Don't be too hard on yourself." She rubbed her temples. "I appreciate that, but it's not easy. She misses me, and I'm juggling all these responsibilities." His silence on the line felt oddly comforting, like he was giving her space to breathe. "If you need any flexibility at work," he said eventually, "just say so. You won't lose my support." Emotion pricked behind her eyes. She swallowed. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll manage." They ended the call, but Andrea lingered at the table, heart heavy yet strangely touched. She'd always prided herself on independence, never wanting to rely on anyone. Now, hearing someone genuinely offer help felt both terrifying and reassuring. The next morning at the office, Andrea arrived early to make final updates to the Foundation presentation. She and Nathan had a meeting with a local youth organization interested in partnering. The hours flew by, and soon they were in a sleek conference room with 2 representatives from the non-profit. Andrea presented the pilot scholarship idea, detailing how cross-innovations would fund partial tuition, mentorship programs, and technology access for qualified students. Nathan watched her with quiet focus. Every now and then, he'd chime in to emphasize the company's commitment. By the end, the non-profit reps seemed impressed, exchanging excited glances. "We'd love to collaborate," one of them said, handing over a folder of their own proposals. "Let's talk specifics soon." After they left, Nathan turned to Andrea with a rare, broad smile. "That was fantastic," he said. "You did an amazing job." Warmth spread through her chest. "It's easy to talk about something I believe in," she replied. "I owe a lot to scholarships myself." They both lingered, the energy of the successful meeting thrumming between them. For a moment, it seemed they might say something else, something personal. But Nathan cleared his throat and gathered the paperwork. "I'll have the legal team draft an MOU. In the meantime, keep up the good work." Andrea nodded, her heart still beating fast. "Will do." That evening, she returned home to find Sierra bent over her homework at the kitchen table. For once, the girl had started on it without prodding. Andrea set down her bag. "Looks like we both made progress today," she teased gently, and Sierra flashed a grin. Andrea realized she was smiling more often these days. Even with the stress, life had taken a turn towards something hopeful, and she had Nathan to thank. Partly. That thought both comforted and frightened her. She was treading a thin line between professional admiration and personal feelings. And with every passing day, that line seemed to blur just a bit more. The tension at work escalated when news of the foundation partnership leaked to certain board members. Andrea saw the fallout firsthand during an impromptu meeting in the main conference room. A trio of stern-faced executives confronted Nathan about allocating company funds toward non-revenue-generating initiatives. She sat in the corner, typing minutes, sensing his frustration simmering beneath the surface. One executive, a man named Warner, pinned Nathan with a cold stare. "You're the CEO, but you're not invincible. We have shareholder interest to consider. If your philanthropic projects threaten our bottom line, there will be consequences." Andrea felt her stomach knot, worried about how this might reflect on her or her role in the foundation. She shot a glance at Nathan, who maintained a cool exterior. "I'm fully aware of our obligations," Nathan replied. "I also believe in our responsibility to the community that supports our business. We'll proceed carefully, but we will proceed." After the meeting, the executives stomped out, leaving Andrea and Nathan alone. She stood slowly, laptop clasped to her chest. "That seemed intense," she murmured, searching his face. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It is, but I'm not backing down." Andrea admired his resolve. "If there's anything I can do, just keep being excellent," he said, forcing a faint smile. "They'll see the long-term value eventually." She nodded, though a worry lingered in her mind. The powerful board members might not care about the long term if short-term profits dipped. She didn't want to see Nathan lose his standing, especially for something so meaningful. In the days that followed, rumors swirled about potential board disagreements. Some employees whispered that Nathan was risking his position. Others predicted the foundation would be quietly scrapped. Andrea tried to keep her head down, focusing on the practical tasks. She scheduled more meetings with potential partners, gathered success stories from scholarship recipients in other programs, and assembled data showing how philanthropic engagement could boost public image. She hoped the facts would help Nathan convince the board. Meanwhile, her bond with Nathan deepened, even if unspoken. They fell into a comfortable rhythm. Quick updates in the morning, shared coffee breaks where they'd brainstorm foundation ideas, and occasional late afternoon chats about how Sierra was doing or how Nathan handled his ongoing legal tug-of-war with his ex-wife. One evening, after the last co-worker had left, Andrea found herself alone with Nathan in the break room. She poured a cup of stale coffee, and he leaned against the counter with a half smile. "I think you're the only person who drinks this stuff after 5 p.m. She shrugged, taking a sip despite the bitter taste. "I need to stay awake a bit longer. School assignments are waiting tonight." He studied her, a touch of concern in his eyes. "You're juggling so much. Classes, your sister, this job. Are you sure you're okay?" A gentle wave of gratitude washed over her. "I'm tired," she admitted. "But it's a good kind of tired. My life's not easy, but at least I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. That's new." Nathan nodded slowly. "I get it. Sometimes I wonder if I spread myself too thin too, holding on to old resentments, forging new paths, trying to keep everyone happy." He paused, then gave a self-conscious laugh. "Sorry, didn't mean to vent." Andrea caught his gaze. "You don't have to apologize. You've done a lot for me, and I'm grateful. If talking helps, I'm here." He held her eyes for a moment, then cleared his throat. "Thanks," he said softly. They stood there, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a quiet sense of closeness filling the space. Finally, he exhaled. "I should get back to work. Those spreadsheets won't fix themselves. She nodded, feeling a pang of disappointment as the moment slipped away. Right. They returned to their respective stations, but Andrea's mind lingered on the warmth in his voice. The shifting tides at work mirrored the shifting emotions inside her. She'd spent so long shielding her heart, yet here she was, dangerously close to letting someone in, a man who'd shown her kindness and respect, but who also carried burdens of his own. As she left for the night, she found herself replaying their conversation in her head. Something intangible was growing, a tentative trust, a glimmer of deeper connection. She couldn't predict where it would lead, but for once, she wasn't blinded by desperation. She had room to breathe, to feel, to consider possibilities beyond mere survival. When she arrived home, Sierra was watching a late-night talk show, her textbooks stacked neatly on the coffee table. Andrea sank down beside her, ruffling her hair affectionately. The teenage girl leaned into her sister's side, content for the moment. Andrea gazed at the flickering TV screen, her thoughts drifting to the office, to Nathan, to the battles yet to come. She didn't have all the answers, but the path ahead felt a little less lonely, a little more hopeful, and that was enough for now. Andrea woke to a soft knock on her apartment door. She blinked at the morning light streaming in through a thin curtain, wondering if she'd overslept. Sierra was still curled up on the couch, fast asleep after a late-night study session. Andrea quietly made her way to the door, heart thumping a bit faster than usual. She was surprised to find Nathan standing in the hallway, holding 2 paper cups of coffee and wearing a slightly sheepish smile. "I realized I never properly thanked you for all your extra work on the foundation," he said in a low voice. "Thought I'd see if you wanted a caffeine boost." Her cheeks warmed. No one had ever brought her morning coffee at home before. She glanced over her shoulder, worried about the messy living room. "Thanks. Didn't expect the CEO of Cross Innovations at my doorstep," she joked, stepping aside to let him in. He took a quick look around, noticing the cramped but tidy space. Sierra stirred, then blinked awake. She looked at Nathan with a mix of curiosity and teenage skepticism. "Morning," she said, rubbing her eyes. Nathan waved softly. "Morning, Sierra. I hope I'm not intruding." Andrea set the coffee on the small kitchen table, motioning for him to sit. "We were just about to start the day." In truth, she felt a bit self-conscious. Her hair was still tangled, and she wore a faded t-shirt, but Nathan seemed at ease, taking in the walls decorated with old family photos, the worn textbooks stacked on the table. Sierra yawned. "I'll go get dressed." She slipped out of the room, throwing Andrea a look that said, "We'll talk about this later." Andrea pulled out a chair and gestured for Nathan to do the same. "So," she began, blowing steam from her coffee, "what's on your mind besides delivering a caffeine rescue?" He folded his arms on the table, gaze resting on her. "We have that board meeting in 2 days. It's crucial if we want to keep the foundation's momentum. I'm hoping you'll join me at the presentation to show them the progress we've made." Her stomach flipped. "In front of the entire board?" she asked, a hint of anxiety in her voice. He nodded. "I want them to see the real person behind these proposals. A young woman who has first-hand knowledge of why such programs matter. Facts and figures help, but a story makes it real." She swallowed. "It's a lot of pressure. They can be intense." Memories of the disapproving executives came rushing back. Nathan reached across the table, resting his hand on hers briefly. "I'll be right there with you," he assured. "I've seen how committed you are to this. You know exactly why it matters." Warmth flooded through Andrea, mingled with nerves. "Okay," she breathed. "I'll do it." A faint smile played on his lips. "Thank you." He left soon after, promising to see her at the office. Sierra poked her head around the corner as soon as the door closed. "What was that about?" she asked with a mischievous grin. Andrea shrugged, sipping her coffee. Work stuff. Foundation proposals. Sierra arched an eyebrow. Sure. And it had nothing to do with the way he was looking at you. Andrea's cheeks heated. We're co-workers, she insisted. He's my boss. Sierra rolled her eyes dramatically. Right, boss. And you didn't notice the tension in the air. Andrea tried to dismiss it, but she couldn't quite ignore the flutter in her chest. She shook her head. Let's not start rumors, okay? Now hurry and get ready for school. Sierra trotted off with a teasing smirk, and Andrea mulled over the exchange. She wasn't sure what to call the connection she felt with Nathan. She only knew it was growing, almost impossible to ignore. A few hours later, Andrea arrived at the office. She found a message from Nathan detailing the schedule for the upcoming board meeting. The bullet points were precise: corporate finances, new tech developments, and a slot for the foundation pitch. She reread the time slot assigned to her, 15 minutes to speak. Her heart pounded at the thought. Resolving not to let fear rule her, she spent the morning finalizing data on scholarship structures, verifying cost breakdowns, and rehearsing a short but powerful speech about why the foundation mattered. With every line she practiced, she pictured the faces of real people who could benefit from such programs, people like her and Sierra, once desperate for any chance at stability. By midday, she felt ready, or as ready as possible. She and Nathan exchanged a few quick words about logistics, but they both seemed focused, determined to make an undeniable case to the board. When evening came, Andrea went home, feeling both anxious and strangely energized. She couldn't shake the excitement of stepping into a higher level of corporate influence, even as she dreaded the scrutiny of board members who might dismiss her as nothing more than a sympathetic figure. Later that night, she forced herself to relax, turning on a light sitcom as Sierra plowed through homework. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the morning, to the moment Nathan placed his hand on hers. The warmth of that brief touch lingered, weaving itself into her renewed sense of purpose. Yes, she was stepping into unknown territory, both professionally and personally, but somehow she felt like she wasn't facing it alone. The day of the board meeting dawned grey and drizzly, as though the city itself held its breath. Andrea stood before her closet, debating which outfit would convey both competence and confidence. She settled on a charcoal blazer over a simple blouse, carefully smoothing any stray wrinkles. Her reflection in the mirror seemed tense, but determined. Sierra surprised her by chiming in from the bathroom doorway. "You look cool, sis," she said softly, a note of encouragement in her voice. "Knock 'em dead." "Thanks," Andrea replied with a shaky laugh. "I'll do my best." She arrived at the office earlier than usual, laptop under her arm. The sleek corridors felt quieter than normal, a subtle sense of anticipation in the air. Nathan was in his office, eyes skimming a stack of documents. He glanced up when she knocked, offering a tense smile. "Ready?" Andrea nodded, though her stomach twisted. "As I'll ever be." "Are you—" He inhaled, setting down the papers. "I'm used to this kind of pushback, but it doesn't mean it's fun. Let's go." They walked together to the executive conference room, an imposing space with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline. The board members were already seated around a long table, their expressions stern. She recognized Warner among them, arms crossed, gaze fixed on Nathan. Nathan opened with a brief overview of the company's recent milestones, profits, new partnerships, and upcoming product launches. The mood in the room remained polite but guarded. Finally, he introduced Andrea. "Today, I want to discuss the Cross Innovations Education Foundation. Andrea Morgan will present our plan." Andrea stood, forcing her voice to remain steady. She clicked on her slides, showing crisp charts of budget allocations and projected community impact. We estimate that with a minimal percentage of the company's annual net profit, we can fund scholarships for up to 100 students in the first year alone, she began, her voice echoing slightly in the large room. She explained the mentorship framework, the potential for positive publicity, and the success stories from similar programs. Halfway through, one board member raised a hand. "Miss Morgan, can you clarify how you'll measure return on this investment? Are we expecting direct revenue or intangible goodwill?" Andrea swallowed. "Primarily goodwill at first. But in the long run, these scholarship recipients could become skilled employees, and the brand reputation benefits could translate into stronger consumer loyalty." She showed more slides detailing how other corporations had seen positive results from community engagement. She finished with a personal note describing how a scholarship had allowed her to attend night classes. "I stand here as living proof that educational opportunities change lives," she said quietly, her heart thumping in her chest. "Our foundation can do that for countless others." Silence followed. Andrea glanced at Nathan, who gave her a slight nod of approval. Then Warner cleared his throat. "This is all very inspiring," he said, voice heavy with sarcasm. "But we can't forget our primary obligation to shareholders. The board remains wary. We can't sign off on funneling money into a non-revenue venture without more concrete guarantees." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. "I understand the concern," he said, "yet we must consider the broader impact of being a socially responsible company. We're not talking about an enormous slice of profits, just enough to launch a modest pilot program." Another board member spoke up, sounding more sympathetic. "Perhaps a trial period, then. We could approve limited funding for 1 year and reassess the results afterward." A low murmur rippled around the table, some seeming to agree, others less certain. Warner's gaze flicked between Nathan and Andrea, clearly unconvinced. Finally, the chairman suggested a formal vote in the next session, giving time to review the data Andrea had presented. Nathan thanked them for hearing the proposal. Andrea breathed a sigh of relief as she gathered her documents, though she could sense the tension still hanging in the air. She'd done her best. Now the board's decision loomed like a dark cloud. Once the meeting ended, Andrea followed Nathan into the hallway, her nerves still jangling. "How do you think it went?" she asked, voice hushed. He exhaled, loosening his tie. "Better than I expected. There's resistance, but you handled yourself well. If we can show them some immediate, tangible gains, like positive media coverage or external sponsorships, they might become more receptive." Andrea's chest swelled with pride and relief. "Thanks," she said, almost breathless. "I was so nervous." He touched her shoulder lightly. "You were incredible," he said quietly, warmth in his eyes. "Thank you for giving them a face to this cause." Their eyes locked for a beat too long, drawing the curious stares of a few passing employees. Andrea felt the air between them crackle, but she cleared her throat, stepping back. "I'm glad I could help." The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks, but Andrea's mind lingered on the potential future of the foundation, and on the way Nathan's hand felt on her shoulder, a gesture that somehow carried more weight than any corporate agreement. She'd stepped into the boardroom feeling outmatched. She left it feeling stronger and more aligned with Nathan's vision than ever. Now, all she could do was wait and hope the board members recognized the value of what she and Nathan were trying to build. A few days later, the stress of the board presentation still weighed on Andrea's mind. Even though they'd agreed to revisit the vote, the uncertainty gnawed at her. She tried channeling her energy into her usual tasks, coordinating Nathan's appointments, managing department reports, and refining the foundation's preliminary scholarship guidelines. Sierra noticed her restlessness at home, and one evening she made a surprising suggestion. Let's go to the park this weekend. Just the two of us, she said, kicking her feet up on the couch. You've been working non-stop. I miss having fun with you. Andrea paused, stirring a pot of pasta on the stove. I can't remember the last time we did something just for fun, she admitted. The idea of relaxing in the sunshine with Sierra sounded wonderful. That Saturday morning, they hopped on a train and headed to a sprawling park in Manhattan, one with green lawns and winding paths around a tranquil lake. The sun was bright, the air crisp. Sierra grabbed a frisbee from a street vendor, and they found an open patch of grass to toss it around. Laughter rang out as they chased each other in circles, ignoring how out of breath they got. At some point, Andrea's phone buzzed in her pocket. She fished it out, scanning a message from Nathan. Hope you're enjoying the weekend. Quick update, the local news outlet might feature our foundation pitch. We'll fill you in Monday. A grin crept across her face. The possibility of public support lifted her spirits, but she shoved the phone away, determined to focus on Sierra for now. They spent hours roaming the park, sampling ice cream from a nearby cart, snapping silly selfies by a row of blossoming trees. For a moment, Andrea could almost forget the weight of responsibilities on her shoulders. Sierra's laughter was like music, light, unburdened, reminding her why she fought so hard in the first place. Late afternoon found them lying on the grass, gazing at the clouds drifting overhead. Sierra turned her head to look at Andrea. I'm proud of you, you know, she said softly. A year ago, we were terrified about rent and foster care. Now you're basically a big shot at a tech company. Andrea gave a short laugh. I'm just an assistant, but it's a good job, and hopefully we'll get this foundation off the ground soon. Sierra's face softened. You've done so much for me. I never say it enough, but I really appreciate you. Warmth flooded Andrea's chest. I appreciate you too, she whispered, ruffling Sierra's hair. We're a team, right? Always. They stayed until the sky began to tint gold, then caught the train back to Queens. Though physically tired, Andrea felt emotionally recharged. She made a promise to herself to carve out more pockets of joy, moments when she and Sierra could just be sisters, not survivors of tragedy. By Monday morning, she returned to the office with a refreshed mindset. Her phone buzzed before she'd even settled at her desk. It was Nathan again, beckoning her to his office. She found him scrolling through an article on his computer, a satisfied tilt to his smile. Check this out, he said, turning the monitor so she could see. The headline read, Local Tech Giant Considers Pioneering Scholarship Program. The article praised Cross Innovations for its forward-thinking approach, mentioning the potential impact on low-income students. Andrea scanned the piece quickly, her excitement rising. This kind of coverage could sway the board, she noted. Nathan nodded. Exactly, I'm forwarding it to them. Maybe this will soften their stance. We need all the positive momentum we can get before the next session. She straightened her posture. What's our next move? He leaned back in his chair, arms folded. We follow up with sponsors and potential partners. Keep building the hype. If we can show widespread support, the board will have a harder time shooting it down. Andrea agreed, her pulse quickening with optimism. She spent the rest of the day calling local businesses, philanthropic groups, and community leaders, pitching the foundation's mission. By late afternoon, she'd booked several appointments for further discussion. At each step, she felt her confidence grow, fueled by the memory of carefree laughter in the park and the quiet satisfaction of forging a brighter future. As dusk settled in, she shut down her computer and gathered her things. Nathan emerged from his office, coat draped over his arm. Heading out? He asked. She nodded, slinging her bag over her shoulder. I made good progress with potential donors today. He offered a small, genuine smile. I appreciate everything you're doing. It doesn't go unnoticed. A flutter of warmth spread through her. I'm glad I can help." They walked to the elevator side by side, exchanging updates on next steps. When the doors slid open, a few employees already inside gave polite nods. Andrea caught one or two curious glances, but she let them pass without concern. The day ended on a high note. The tension of boardroom skepticism momentarily eased by hopeful news coverage and renewed determination. Andrea stepped off the elevator into the bustling city night, ready to head home and share the good news with Sierra. For the first time since the foundation pitch began, the path ahead looked less like an uphill climb and more like a promising horizon. She felt light, almost buoyant with the realization that sometimes a simple day of laughter and sunshine was all it took to remind her why she fought so hard in the first place. The positive press coverage generated a surge of new inquiries and offers to collaborate. Andrea juggled calls from local community groups, news stations wanting interviews, and even a few philanthropic individuals looking to donate. She worked late into the evenings, fueled by the excitement of seeing the foundation gain traction. Nathan arranged a small celebratory lunch for the project team, mainly Andrea, a couple of PR staffers, and one of the legal advisors who believed in the cause. Over takeout sushi in a conference room, they brainstormed ways to maintain the momentum. Andrea felt a growing sense of accomplishment each time she spoke, as if she'd finally found her place in this massive organization. Yet not everyone was on board. The undercurrent of skepticism from certain higher-ups lingered. One evening, as Andrea was tidying her desk, she spotted Warner passing by. He paused, glancing at her with thinly veiled disapproval. "Miss Morgan, right?" he said, voice low. She stood straighter. "Yes, sir." "Is there something you need?" He pursed his lips. "I've heard rumors you're leading the charge on this foundation business. I hope you realize we won't tolerate reckless spending. If this project drains more resources than it brings in, you'll be the first one held accountable." Her gut twisted, but she kept her face neutral. "I understand concerns about profitability, Mr. Warner. We're gathering evidence of community impact that can benefit the company's reputation in the long run." Warner gave a curt nod, clearly unimpressed. "Reputation doesn't pay dividends, if you ask me. Cross is letting emotion cloud his judgment." Without waiting for a response, he strode away. Andrea exhaled shakily. The exchange reminded her that despite recent successes, some influential figures remained firmly opposed. She pressed her lips together, fueling her determination. She wouldn't be intimidated. Too much was at stake. Late that night, as she double-checked the day's emails, she found one from the board secretary. The subject line read, "Urgent, preliminary financial review." Her pulse quickened. The message indicated the board would request a thorough breakdown of the foundation's prospective finances at their next meeting, which had been moved up to the following week. A sense of unease gnawed at her. The new date gave her barely enough time to compile everything. She printed the email and headed straight to Nathan's office. It was after hours, so the floor was mostly deserted. She found him hunched over his desk, reviewing spreadsheets by lamplight. He looked up when she knocked, exhaustion etched in his features. "Found something you need to see," she said, handing him the email. He scanned it, jaw tightening. "They're pushing up the timeline," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Typical maneuver. Give us less time to prepare, hoping we'll slip up." Andrea nodded. "We'll work through the weekend if we have to. We can't let them catch us unprepared." He studied her, an appreciation flickering in his gaze. "I really value your commitment," he said softly. "It's not just a job to you, is it?" She shook her head, a hint of a smile tugging her lips. "No, it's not. It's personal and it matters." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nathan sighed, closing his laptop. "I'll handle the revenue projections. You focus on cost analysis and potential sponsorships. If we can prove outside support, We might neutralize the board's concerns about draining company funds. Got it, she said, grabbing a pen and paper to jot down notes. Her chest fluttered with both adrenaline and an odd sense of closeness. They were in this battle together, forging ahead despite the risks. By the time Andrea got home, Sierra was already asleep. Andrea tiptoed into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, leaning against the counter in the dim light. Her thoughts churned between the looming board showdown and the unpredictable friction from people like Warner. As gratifying as the foundation work felt, it also revealed the precarious nature of corporate politics. If the board decided to shut down funding, everything could unravel in an instant. She reminded herself that she'd faced worse before. She'd lost her parents, nearly lost her sister to the foster system, and survived dire financial straits. This was just another hurdle, yet the stakes felt higher now. It wasn't just her future on the line, it was also the dreams of every potential scholarship recipient they hoped to support. Finishing her water, Andrea resolved to keep fighting. She'd stay up as late as it took, learn whatever she had to, and stand by Nathan in the coming clash. As she climbed into bed, she couldn't ignore a pang of worry that even a strong partnership might not be enough if the board united against them. Still, she clung to hope, certain that a vision rooted in compassion and opportunity deserved every ounce of effort she could muster. That weekend, the office lights stayed on long after normal hours. Andrea and Nathan huddled in the conference room with spreadsheets, presentations, and endless cups of coffee. Each page of data needed to be airtight: projections for scholarship costs, timelines for enrollment, expected media benefits, and potential corporate partnerships. Every few hours, Andrea would step outside to stretch and take a brief walk down the deserted hallway, searching for a moment's peace. Her phone pinged frequently with texts from Sierra, who tried to be supportive. "Don't forget to eat. I'm fine. Just get this done," and the occasional "I miss you" that made Andrea's heart clench. Sunday night bled into Monday morning. As dawn approached, Andrea finally collapsed into a chair, massaging her temples. "I think the numbers are as solid as we can make them," she murmured. Nathan loosened his tie, eyes rimmed with fatigue. "I agree. We'll present these as proof of concept. If the board isn't swayed by this, then I doubt anything else will work." They headed home briefly to shower and change, returning just in time for the Monday board meeting. Andrea's nerves thrummed as she and Nathan entered the imposing conference room. The atmosphere was charged, the board members flipping through the documents they'd submitted. Warner was there, as was the more sympathetic chairman, along with several others whose votes could tip the scale. Nathan launched into a concise overview of the foundation's financial projections. Andrea followed with an organized breakdown of outside sponsorships they were lining up. Her voice trembled at first, but she steadied when she saw a few board members nodding, seemingly impressed by the thoroughness. Once they finished, the chairman folded his hands. "We'll open the floor for questions." Warner's expression was cool. "Miss Morgan, these sponsorships, are they confirmed or merely prospective? What if they back out once they see no direct profit?" Andrea squared her shoulders. "We have letters of intent from 3 local businesses. I can't guarantee profit for them, but they're community-focused ventures. Their support is grounded in goodwill and brand building." He pursed his lips, clearly unsatisfied, but let it go. Another member asked about the timeline for scholarships, and Andrea explained the pilot's target start date, referencing her data meticulously. She saw the tension on Nathan's face as he watched the board process every word. Finally, the chairman suggested they vote on continuing the foundation's pilot phase with limited funding, subject to quarterly reviews. A hush fell over the room. Andrea's pulse hammered in her ears. She stole a glance at Nathan, who gave her a barely perceptible nod. Hands went up, some quickly, others hesitantly. The chairman tallied the votes. Andrea felt her stomach twist, bracing for disappointment. When he announced the result, relief flooded her entire body. The motion passed by a narrow margin. "We'll fund the pilot," the chairman said, "with quarterly oversight to ensure accountability." Though they hadn't achieved unanimous support, it was enough to move forward. Andrea almost let out a triumphant cry, but she maintained her composure, offering a polite smile. Nathan extended a hand to the chairman in thanks. Warner's face remained stony, but he said nothing, merely gathering his papers and leaving. Andrea sensed that the battle wasn't over. He and others would be watching for any misstep. Still, for now, they'd won. Later, back in Nathan's office, the tension between relief and exhaustion finally spilled over. Andrea set her binder on his desk, trying not to grin too widely. "We did it," she breathed. Nathan leaned against the edge of his desk, looking at her with a quiet pride. "We did. Thanks to you." She released a shaky laugh, adrenaline still coursing through her. "I can't believe it was so close." He exhaled, the lines of stress easing from his face. "I've fought a lot of corporate battles, but this one felt more personal than most." His gaze lingered on her a fraction longer than necessary. "You made the difference." Emotions welled in her chest, and before she could second-guess herself, she stepped forward and hugged him, a brief, heartfelt gesture. He froze for just a second, then wrapped his arms around her, returning the embrace. In that moment, it felt like all the walls they'd built to stay professional slipped away. When they separated, Andrea's cheeks flushed. She fumbled for words. Sorry. That was..." Nathan shook his head gently. "Don't be. This is your victory too." They stared at each other, a spark of understanding passing between them that words couldn't quite capture. Then, as if remembering where they were, Andrea cleared her throat and took a step back. "So, I'll prepare the next steps for launching the pilot. We should confirm those sponsor meetings soon." Nathan nodded, regaining his usual calm. "Yes, definitely. Let's keep the momentum." They went about the rest of the day in a state of controlled excitement, fielding calls from staff congratulating them on securing partial funding. By nightfall, Andrea headed home with a mixture of triumph and trembling hope. Her dream of helping others now had a corporate stamp of approval, at least for a trial period, and she couldn't ignore the surge of closeness she'd felt in Nathan's arms. The future felt equal parts daunting and exhilarating. But she no longer had to face it alone. The pilot phase of the foundation kicked off with a surge of momentum. Andrea and Nathan assembled a small team to handle applications, partnership details, and event planning. Word spread fast through the community college networks that Cross Innovations would be offering scholarships for the upcoming semester. Andrea's phone buzzed non-stop with inquiries from prospective students, hopeful for a lifeline. Amid the excitement, Andrea sensed an undercurrent of tension at the company. She noticed hush-hush conversations in corridors and a spike in guarded looks from certain executives. Nathan seemed preoccupied, especially after receiving abrupt phone calls that ended with his jaw clenched. When she asked if everything was all right, he gave vague reassurances. One evening, as Andrea finalized a brochure for the pilot scholarship program, Nathan stepped into her makeshift workspace. "Busy?" he asked, voice subdued. She glanced up, noticing the tight set of his shoulders. "Just wrapping up. Is everything okay?" He settled into the chair across from her, taking a moment before responding. "The board wants a faster path to monetizing one of our new tech products. We've got a major launch in a few months, and they're pressuring me to pour all resources into it. Some see the foundation as a distraction." Andrea sighed. "Didn't we just win approval for the pilot?" He nodded. "We did, but apparently internal forecasts show we might face a dip in quarterly earnings if the product launch is delayed. Something about supply chain issues. That makes the foundation an easy target for cost-cutting." She felt a surge of frustration. So they'll come after what they see as excess, no matter how valuable it is to the community. Nathan's gaze flicked to the pile of scholarship applications on her desk. I won't let them shut it down, but the pressure is real. Warner is pushing for a re-evaluation of all non-essential projects. Andrea rubbed her temples. We have to prove we can handle both the new product and the foundation without jeopardizing profits. That's the only way to keep them from pulling the plug. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Exactly. And I've been trying to manage some personal issues on top of it. My ex-wife's lawyers keep hitting me with random claims, as if looking for a bigger settlement. She reached out, resting a hand on his forearm in a comforting gesture. I'm sorry, that sounds overwhelming. His eyes held a hint of vulnerability. It is. But I'll figure it out. They stayed like that for a moment, the air thick with an unspoken connection. Then Andrea withdrew her hand, clearing her throat. Let's come up with a plan. We'll show the board we can run the foundation efficiently, even while expediting product development. Maybe we can highlight cross-team collaboration or something that ties the scholarship recipients into the tech field. Nathan's expression brightened. Yes, bridging the two could demonstrate how the foundation isn't a drain, but an investment in future talent. The next day, Andrea and Nathan scrambled to gather data on how scholarship recipients might eventually fill internships at Cross Innovations, bolstering the company's long-term workforce. They pitched the idea internally to department heads, aiming to create an integrated narrative. Help students now, grow skilled employees tomorrow. Though some managers were enthusiastic, others proved lukewarm, citing time constraints. Andrea pushed on, scheduling meetings and drafting slides. She found herself working late again, Sierra sending supportive texts about leftover dinner in the fridge. As deadlines loomed, the tension in the air became almost palpable. Nathan's phone calls with the board grew frequent and strained. Andrea overheard him calmly defending the foundation's purpose multiple times. She knew he was under extraordinary pressure. One afternoon, after a particularly heated phone call, Nathan stepped out of his office with a distant look in his eyes. Andrea, standing by her desk, caught his gaze. He pressed his lips into a thin line, then walked over. "They're not backing down," he said in a near whisper. "If our product launch can't meet the projected timeline, they'll cut funding for the pilot midstream." Andrea felt her stomach drop. "But we've already accepted applications. Some students are counting on this." His voice wavered, revealing his own frustration. "I won't let them down, but I'm running out of ways to juggle everything." Without thinking, Andrea reached for his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "We'll find a way," she vowed. He held her gaze, something desperate flickering there. She wondered how much longer either of them could keep up this fight. Yet she also recognized a fierce resolve. He wasn't one to surrender, and neither was she. As she released his hand, she could feel the weight of the stakes settling across her shoulders. This foundation had become more than a good idea. It was a beacon of hope for students like her, for people who needed just one break to change their lives. She refused to let corporate indifference snuff it out. But with the board pushing relentlessly and personal pressures mounting, the path forward felt like walking a tightrope with no safety net in sight. Days blurred together as Cross Innovations plunged into crisis mode. The development team hit a snag with the upcoming product launch, something about a key component that was suddenly in short supply. Andrea heard frantic conversations in the hallways, overheard urgent calls with suppliers. Every delay chipped away at confidence in meeting the board's aggressive deadline. Meanwhile, the foundation pilot was off to a shaky start. Andrea had begun notifying the selected scholarship recipients, but the fear of funding cuts loomed like a storm cloud. She lost sleep, worrying about what would happen if they had to pull the rug out from under those hopeful students. In the midst of this turmoil, a media inquiry arrived. A well-known tech journalist wanted to interview Nathan about the company's new product and the ambitious scholarship program. The PR department saw it as a golden opportunity to highlight cross-innovation's innovation and humanitarian angle. Andrea hoped it might generate positive press, shielding the foundation from further attacks. Nathan asked her to join him for the interview, scheduled at a downtown TV studio. The morning of, they rode in a car together, tension crackling in the air. Andrea fiddled with the hem of her blazer, glancing at Nathan. He looked composed, but she recognized the flicker of anxiety in his eyes. When they arrived, a bright stage greeted them, cameras perched on tall tripods. The show's host was a polished woman with a warm smile who introduced them on live television. Today, we have Nathan Cross, CEO of Cross Innovations, and Andrea Morgan, an integral part of the new Scholarship Foundation, she announced to the camera. Tell us about your vision. Nathan answered first, describing the cutting-edge tech product and how it could revolutionize everyday life. Then the host turned to Andrea. And the scholarship pilot? Some people might call it a distraction from profit margins. What do you say to that? Andrea drew a breath, choosing her words carefully. When we invest in education, we invest in future talent. By helping students facing financial barriers, we're not just doing charity. We're expanding the pool of capable, innovative minds who can contribute to our industry. It's about long-term growth and social responsibility. The host nodded, intrigued. But with reports of potential delays in your product launch, can the company afford this initiative? Andrea shared a quick glance with Nathan before answering. Every investment carries risk, but we believe the payoff, both for the community and for our company, justifies it. We're prepared to adjust timelines, partner with other organizations, and ensure that this program remains viable. Nathan joined in, reinforcing the message. The interview concluded on a positive note, painting Cross Innovations as both forward-thinking and compassionate. Andrea felt a rush of relief as they walked off set, hoping the segment would buy them time and goodwill. However, back at the office, reality sank in again. The supply chain crisis continued. Warner sent out a scathing memo, warning that if the product wasn't ready for release by the upcoming quarter, the foundation's budget would be reconsidered. Tension rippled through the company's leadership ranks, leaving Andrea and Nathan scrambling for solutions. Late one evening, Andrea trudged to Nathan's office to deliver the latest updates. She found him leaning over his desk, head in his hands. He looked up, and she glimpsed raw exhaustion in his eyes. "I've been on the phone with suppliers all day," he said. "Nothing's guaranteed." She set the file of documents on his desk. The interview aired well. We got some supportive messages from community leaders, but the board remains fixated on the bottom line. Nathan raked a hand through his hair. "I know. And on top of that, my ex-wife's attorneys filed another motion claiming she should receive a portion of any new venture profits. They're tying the foundation and product launch into the settlement." Andrea's eyes widened. "That's absurd!" He gave a humorless laugh. "Absurd. But it's one more legal fire to put out. My personal life is complicating everything further." Andrea's heart ached. She stepped closer, unsure if it was her place, but feeling compelled to offer solace. "Nathan, I'm sorry you're going through all this." "You're only one person." He looked at her, the weight of his burdens evident. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing everyone, my employees, these scholarship students, you. I'm worried it's all about to collapse." Without thinking, she rested a hand on his shoulder, letting it linger in silent support. "I believe in you," she said softly. "We'll find a way." He lowered his gaze, covering her hand with his own. The connection crackled with unspoken emotion. For a moment, He closed his eyes, as though drawing strength from that simple gesture. Then he straightened, clearing his throat. "All right," he said, his voice steadier. "Let's see what we can salvage for tomorrow." Andrea nodded, pulling her hand back gently. They still had hours of work ahead, and the stakes only climbed higher. Stepping back into the hallway, she felt the creeping dread that the foundation and everything they'd worked for could be one misstep away from disaster. Yet the bond she felt with Nathan gave her courage, enough to keep fighting, even as the walls seemed to be closing in. A restless energy hung in the air at Cross Innovations. Departments felt the pressure to save the product launch, cut costs, and appease shareholders, all while the foundation demanded resources of its own. Andrea noticed tensions flaring among team members who once cooperated smoothly. One morning, she overheard a confrontation in the hallway, a senior engineer complaining that they were undermanned for the product's final testing phase. "We need more staff, not budget going to some scholarship PR stunt," the engineer fumed. Another employee tried to defend the foundation, pointing out it was a relatively small piece of the overall budget. Still, the argument underscored the growing rift within the company. Andrea approached Nathan, who looked drained by the day's myriad demands. "We need to address employee morale," she said. "People are pointing fingers and blaming the foundation for every shortfall." He agreed with a weary nod. "I'll organize a town hall meeting. We'll explain our priorities, how we can do both, launch the product and keep the pilot going." The town hall took place in a large auditorium on the 25th floor. Nathan stood on stage with key department heads, fielding questions from dozens of employees. Andrea watched from the sidelines, cradling her tablet. She could feel the frustration in the room as staff vented about deadlines, resources, and confusion over shifting priorities. Nathan kept his voice calm as he responded, explaining that the foundation's budget was modest compared to the overall product investment. However, some staff remained unconvinced. A few questioned the decision to channel any funds toward philanthropic efforts in the midst of a potential product crisis. Stepping forward, Andrea took a breath and spoke up. "I'm part of the foundation team, and I've also been heavily involved in coordinating resources for the product launch. I see firsthand how both can coexist. We've created internship tracks for scholarship recipients who might one day help develop future products. It's an investment in people who could become valuable members of our workforce." A tentative hush fell as she described how community goodwill could lead to better brand loyalty, even among potential tech-savvy customers. Some employees seemed receptive, others skeptical. By the end of the meeting, Andrea wasn't sure they'd convinced everyone, but at least they'd tried to bridge the divide. Afterward, Nathan found her near the stage as people filed out. "That was brave," he said quietly. "You spoke well." "Thank you." She sighed. "I'm just worried we're losing too many people to frustration. They don't see the bigger picture." His gaze shifted, focusing on a distant point. "It's hard to see a bigger picture when your day-to-day is chaos. We need results, and fast." Just then, Warner approached, arms folded. "Nice speech," he said, his tone almost mocking. "We'll see if it makes any difference when the quarterly numbers come in." Nathan turned to face him, posture stiff. "The product will launch on time, and the pilot will continue unless the board overrides our previous vote." Warner gave a tight-lipped smile. "We'll see. The clock is ticking, Cross. Don't forget it." With that, he strode away, leaving tension in his wake. Andrea felt a pang of dread. She'd never seen Nathan look quite so cornered. She followed him out of the auditorium. "I'm sorry about him," she murmured. He shook his head. "Not your fault, but he's influential, and if the product team misses even one milestone, he'll use it as proof the foundation is a distraction." He paused, letting out a long breath. "I wish I could shield you from the politics, but we're in this together." She offered a reassuring half-smile. I'm not afraid of a fight. We've come too far to back down now. That evening, as she walked home, Andrea replayed the day's events. The fractures in the ranks were deepening, and Warner's scornful attitude hinted at a looming power struggle. She could see a scenario where the board, guided by fear of a delayed product launch, pulled the plug on the foundation. Yet she wasn't ready to admit defeat. She thought of Sierra, of all the students who'd already pinned their hopes on those scholarship letters. Their future hinged on Cross Innovations honoring its promise. Despite her anxiety, Andrea felt a steely resolve growing inside her. No matter how fractured the company's morale became, no matter how relentless Warner was, she would keep pushing for the cause she believed in. As the day slipped into night, she reminded herself that she'd survived life's harshest tests before. This was just another storm to weather, albeit one with the power to alter countless lives. She clung to the flicker of hope that if they could bridge the gaps within the company and push the product forward, they might yet preserve the Foundation's dream. The mounting tension reached a breaking point one afternoon when the product development team announced that, despite heroic efforts, they needed an extra 2 weeks to complete final testing. Andrea saw the email blast go company-wide, and within minutes, heated conversations broke out across the floor. She hurried into Nathan's office to find him standing by the window, staring at the city skyline. "I just heard," she said quietly. 2 weeks. "Will the board go ballistic?" He turned, eyes stormy. "Likely, yes. Warner's been waiting for this. I'm sure he'll demand immediate cuts to non-essential initiatives." She inhaled sharply. "That means us." Before Nathan could respond, the phone on his desk rang. He grimaced. "Speak of the devil." Picking up, he answered in clipped tones. Andrea could hear Warner's voice muffled on the other end, growing louder with each passing moment. Finally, Nathan set the receiver down, cheeks flushed with anger. "He's calling an emergency board session tomorrow. He wants to revisit the Foundation's budget allocation." Andrea's stomach dropped. "What can we do?" Nathan's jaw tensed. "We present a solid case. Again, highlight the progress we've made, the commitments we have, but if they decide to slash the budget, we may not have a way to stop them." She closed her eyes, dread washing over her. "What about the students already accepted? Are we just going to pull back their awards?" He shook his head, looking deeply troubled. "I'll fight to keep their scholarships, but if the board rescinds funding, we might not have the money to deliver." Andrea placed a hand over her mouth, struggling to keep composure. They'd given these students hope, and now it might all come crashing down. Her gaze hardened. "We can't let that happen." By evening, the air in the building felt charged with anxiety. Andrea stayed late, compiling data on the Foundation's early impacts, how many students had already been approved, how local media was starting to praise Cross Innovations for its social responsibility. She knew it might not sway the board, but she had to try. Nathan joined her near midnight, looking haggard but determined. "I'll add your data to my presentation," he said, skimming her report. "We should get some rest if we're going to face them tomorrow." She nodded, powering down her computer. As they walked toward the elevator, she noticed him eyeing her with concern. "You holding up okay?" he asked softly. Andrea managed a faint smile. "I'm exhausted, terrified, but we don't have a choice, right?" He pressed the elevator button. "We keep fighting," he said, voice firm. Then in an unexpected gesture, he reached for her hand, gripping it gently. The elevator doors slid open, revealing an empty car. They stepped inside, hands still entwined for those few seconds of privacy. Neither spoke, the moment heavy with fear and an undercurrent of something deeper, an unspoken bond that had grown through shared struggles. Eventually, he released her hand, clearing his throat as the doors opened on the ground floor. "I'll see you in the morning," he said, giving her a look that was equal parts reassurance and regret. She nodded, stepping out into the cool night air. Andrea's mind whirled on the journey home. She dreaded the confrontation to come, but couldn't ignore the warmth she felt from Nathan's touch. Despite everything, or maybe because of it, they seemed to be finding each other in the chaos. But was that enough to save the foundation? Or was it just another fragile thread that could snap under the board's crushing weight? The next morning came too quickly, her alarm piercing through her restless sleep. She dressed in a simple navy suit, determined to appear composed. Sierra offered a quick hug before Andrea hurried out the door. "Good luck," her sister murmured, anxiety evident in her eyes. At the office, the boardroom was already filling by the time Andrea arrived. She slid into a seat beside Nathan, whose features were set in a determined mask. Warner sat opposite them, flipping through papers, occasionally shooting them a smug glance. The chairman tapped a pen against the table, calling the session to order. Nathan began by acknowledging the delay in the product's launch, then pivoted to the Foundation's pilot. "We're at a critical juncture," he said, voice resonating with calm authority. "We've accepted a cohort of deserving students who rely on us to honor our commitment." Andrea caught the subtle shake of Warner's head. Her heart raced as she passed out copies of her report, highlighting media coverage and potential talent pipelines. A flicker of hope ignited when she saw a few board members nodding, but Warner's expression remained icy. "This is all well and good," he said, voice cold. "Unfortunately, with a product delay looming, the financial risk is unacceptable. We must protect shareholders." The debate that followed was heated, each side presenting arguments with growing fervor. Andrea's hands shook under the table. She exchanged anxious glances with Nathan. It felt like everything they'd worked for hung in the balance, teetering on a knife's edge. If the board chose to slash the Foundation's budget now, it would be the end of their dream, and a betrayal of the students they'd already promised to help. Andrea's heart pounded as voices rose in the boardroom. Tensions flared, the debate looping in circles. Profit versus philanthropy, immediate returns versus long-term vision. Warner took every opportunity to stoke fears of financial collapse. Even some previously neutral board members seemed swayed by his dire forecasts. Nathan fought back, citing the progress made with scholarship recipients and the positive press coverage. He emphasized that cutting the Foundation now would be a public relations disaster. Still, Andrea could see anxiety creeping into his eyes. The product delay had cornered him, giving ammunition to those who opposed his philanthropic stance. At one point, the chairman called for order, glaring at Warner for his interruptions. Then he turned to Andrea. "Ms. Morgan, you've been instrumental in this foundation. Tell us plainly, why should we keep funding it when the product is at risk?" All eyes fell on her. She felt a quiver in her throat. She glanced at Nathan, whose tense expression told her everything was on the line. Summoning courage, she stood. "Because there's more to a company than immediate profits," she said, her voice shaking initially but growing stronger. "We've already accepted students who believe in us, some who, like me, come from backgrounds where hope is scarce. Pulling that promise away now would be not just a PR failure, but a moral one." A hush settled. Andrea locked eyes with Warner, refusing to waver. "Isn't it worth investing in the people who might one day help this company innovate and thrive? Our product setback is real, but that doesn't mean we abandon everything else. We can solve both challenges if we stay committed." The chairman nodded, impressed by her conviction, but Warner merely sighed in exasperation. "That's very moving," he said dismissively, "yet irrelevant to our shareholders' immediate concerns. The board must vote." Andrea's stomach lurched. As the chairman called for the vote, the atmosphere felt thick with finality. One by one, board members raised their hands. Some in favor of retaining the foundation's funding under close scrutiny, others for immediate cuts. Warner was among the latter, of course. Andrea's palms went clammy as she waited for the tally. The chairman counted, pausing at each face. When he finished, his gaze flicked between Nathan and Andrea. "It appears we have a tie," he announced, brow creasing. "That leaves the deciding vote to me." A collective breath caught in the room. Andrea's heart hammered so loudly, she wondered if anyone else could hear it. The chairman folded his hands, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. "I've listened carefully to both sides," he began. "We face undeniable financial risks with the delayed launch, but I also see real value in the Foundation's pilot and the commitments we've made." He paused, glancing at Warner. "However, I propose a compromise. The Foundation's pilot continues, but with a reduced budget. Enough to honor the scholarships awarded, but limiting further expansion until the product launch stabilizes." He surveyed the room, then locked eyes on Nathan. "I trust you'll streamline operations and ensure the program runs lean." Andrea released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They weren't shutting down the foundation entirely. Students would still receive their scholarships. It wasn't the full victory they'd hoped for, but it was better than the alternative. Warner scowled but seemed unable to overturn the chairman's decision. The board meeting wrapped up in a tense flurry of papers and hushed murmurs. Nathan managed a terse nod, expression unreadable. As the board members filed out, the chairman turned to Andrea and Nathan. "Make the best of this compromise," he said wearily. "If you can prove it works without dragging the company down, you might earn fuller support in the future." When everyone else had cleared out, Andrea found herself alone with Nathan in the empty boardroom, the long table strewn with documents. She sank into a chair, adrenaline crashing. "So, we keep the scholarships, but we're forced to cut back the rest." Nathan sighed, loosening his tie. "We can't expand the program as we planned, but at least we're not abandoning it." He walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for what you said in there. You were amazing." She glanced up, exhaustion and relief mingling on her face. "I just told them the truth." He offered a wry smile. "Sometimes that's all it takes." Then his gaze turned somber. "This means the foundation will be on life support until the product launch is sorted. We have to succeed with a fraction of the resources." Andrea nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "We'll make it work." He slid into the seat beside her, silence stretching. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of the day pressing down. Then, tentatively, he reached out and took her hand, fingers intertwining with hers. "I'm sorry it couldn't be everything we hoped," he murmured. "But we'll keep fighting." She squeezed his hand, a tear escaping down her cheek before she could stop it. "Yeah," she whispered, her voice trembling with both relief and disappointment. In that quiet boardroom, a fragile victory hung in the air, enough to keep hope alive, yet not enough to dispel the clouds looming over them. Still, as Andrea looked at Nathan, she felt a renewed sense of resolve. They had each other, a common purpose, and a promise to the students who were counting on them. If that wasn't reason enough to keep going, she didn't know what was. The weeks that followed the board's compromise decision felt like a test of endurance. The product launch team scrambled to meet revised deadlines, while the foundation struggled on leaner resources. Andrea dedicated every spare hour to ensuring the first cohort of scholarship students received what they were promised. Despite the tension, her determination remained unbroken. To everyone's relief, the tech product finally rolled out 2 weeks behind schedule, but without further delays. There was a small dip in quarterly earnings, but the new gadget generated enough buzz to appease cautious investors. Warner, though visibly displeased, couldn't argue with early sales figures that looked promising. Meanwhile, Andrea juggled scholarship administration with her regular responsibilities, often working late into the night. During one of those late evenings, Nathan approached her desk with 2 bottles of sparkling water. "To celebrate," he said, offering her one. She arched an eyebrow. "Celebrate what?" He sank into the chair beside her. "We're not fully out of the woods, but the product's launch numbers have exceeded the board's worst fears. That means they can't claim the foundation is entirely to blame for any financial shortfall." Andrea exhaled, taking the bottle. She hesitated, then clinked it against his. "I'll take a partial victory," she said softly. "Anything that lets us keep our promise to those students." For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, sipping their drinks. The flicker of office lights cast long shadows across the floor. Nathan finally spoke, voice tinged with vulnerability. "I want you to know, none of this, our success, the foundation, would be possible without you." She felt a rush of warmth. "It's a team effort, but thank you for believing in me." His gaze lingered on her face. "I'd like to keep believing in you, beyond just work," he admitted, tone quiet, yet sure. She met his eyes, heart skittering in her chest. They said nothing more, allowing the charged silence to speak for them. Eventually, Nathan cleared his throat. "You should go home. Sierra's probably worried." Andrea nodded, heart still pounding. "Right. Thanks for the reminder." That night, she left the building feeling lighter than she had in weeks. They still had a mountain to climb, but for the first time, she sensed genuine possibility in both her professional and personal life. When she got home, Sierra noticed her flushed cheeks and teased her mercilessly about the soft glow of a woman in love. But Andrea only laughed, refusing to confirm or deny anything. In the following days, the Foundation's pilot quietly moved forward. Tuition payments for the chosen students were processed, and Andrea scheduled their first mentorship sessions. Each time she reviewed the scholarship files, she thought about how close they'd come to failing these young people. The near miss made her even more protective of their futures. One evening, Andrea accompanied Nathan to a small networking event for local philanthropists. They hoped to find additional sponsors to make up for the scaled-back corporate funding. As they mingled in the room full of polished donors and socialites, Nathan introduced her as the driving force behind the new foundation. She felt a surge of pride mixed with nerves. Yet the more she spoke, the more she realized she had a genuine story to tell, her own background, her struggles with Sierra, and the life-changing power of a single opportunity. People responded positively, exchanging business cards and promising to follow up. Afterward, in the car ride home, Andrea's pulse still raced with the exhilaration of potential new partnerships. Nathan studied her, a faint smile curving his lips. "You're incredible when you talk about the foundation," he said softly. "It's like watching someone shine from the inside out." She turned her head, cheeks warming. "It's easy to be passionate when I've lived it. I know what it feels like to need that one break." He reached over, resting a hand gently on hers. "I'm grateful I could be part of your story," he murmured. They exchanged no more words, letting the hush of the city lights speak for them. By the time Andrea arrived at her apartment, she felt as if her heart might burst from a mix of hope and tenderness. She couldn't recall the last time life felt so full of possibility. At home, Sierra greeted her at the door. "How'd it go?" she asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Andrea set down her bag, a smile playing on her lips. "Good," she said simply. "Better than I ever expected." Then she pulled her sister into a spontaneous hug, feeling tears prick the corners of her eyes. They had come so far from those desperate nights where every knock on the door felt like a threat. Now, even though the foundation's budget remained precarious, it existed. Students were receiving scholarships. And something new and fragile was blossoming between Andrea and Nathan, offering a glimpse of a future she'd never dared to imagine. Months rolled by, marked by steady progress in the Foundation's pilot and cautious optimism among the board. Although Warner still watched from the sidelines, the mild success of the product launch kept him from mounting further attacks on the scholarship program. Meanwhile, Andrea's everyday life settled into a precarious balance. She worked full-time at Cross Innovations, studied part-time, and managed the Foundation's growing list of responsibilities. During this period, Andrea and Nathan's closeness deepened, though both were careful about keeping their personal feelings discreet at the office. The gossip mill still churned, but most co-workers viewed Andrea with growing respect rather than suspicion, seeing her competence firsthand. Nathan continued to navigate board politics, but at least the immediate crisis had passed. One evening, Sierra announced she'd been invited to a friend's house, leaving Andrea alone in their small apartment. She contemplated a rare night of quiet study when her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Dinner, I owe you a proper meal after today's successful donor pitch." She hesitated, glancing at the clock. A wave of excitement fluttered through her. "I'd like that," she replied. They met at a cozy Italian restaurant on a less crowded street in Manhattan. The soft glow of candlelight and the faint aroma of basil and garlic created an intimate setting far removed from their corporate reality. Nathan pulled out a chair for her, and she felt a small thrill at the old-fashioned courtesy. Over plates of pasta and glasses of sparkling water, they spoke of everything except work, childhood memories, favorite movies, random musings about life. Andrea recounted a tale of Sierra's mischievous pranks, while Nathan shared snippets of his Ohio upbringing, their usual tension, born from stressful deadlines and company politics, melted into a simple, warm connection. At some point, the conversation turned to the future. Nathan set down his fork, swirling the remains of his drink. "Do you ever think about what comes next, once your studies are done?" he asked, meeting her gaze. Andrea took a moment to collect her thoughts. "I do. I'm finishing my associate degree soon, and I'd like to pursue a bachelor's in business, part-time, maybe. Ultimately, I want to help the foundation grow." She paused, a glimmer of nerves in her voice. "Assuming it survives." He leaned forward, brow furrowing. "It will survive. I'm determined to see it through, and I know you won't let it fail." She smiled, a mixture of gratitude and bashfulness. "It's not just about the foundation, though. I also think about Sierra, her future, and, well, I think about you." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Nathan's expression softened, his hand sliding across the table to rest on hers. "I'm glad to hear that," he said gently, "because I think about you too. A lot." For a moment, they simply held each other's gaze. Then he spoke again, voice quieter. "Look, I know we started off in unusual circumstances. I never want you to feel indebted or compromised. You're your own person, Andrea, talented, strong, and fiercely independent." She squeezed his hand. "I know, and I also know I want to be here with you, wherever this goes." They walked out of the restaurant hand in hand, the cool night air snapping them back to reality. Under a street lamp's soft glow, he pulled her into a gentle embrace. It felt both new and like something inevitable, a meeting of souls who had walked parallel paths for too long. When he finally drove her home, neither wanted to break the moment. But Andrea's phone buzzed with a text from Sierra. "Home soon. Mrs. Chen is still here." She laughed softly, showing him the screen. "I can't keep Mrs. Chen captive all night." Nathan nodded, pressing a quick kiss to Andrea's temple. I understand. Another time, then. She slipped out of the car, heart beating hard. As she watched him drive away, she felt a wave of contentment wash over her. They'd crossed a threshold into something beyond professional camaraderie, something that felt solid despite the corporate chaos. The months ahead remained uncertain. Board politics, personal obligations, and the uncharted waters of a deepening relationship. But tonight, as she climbed the steps to her apartment, Andrea allowed herself a quiet moment of joy. Sierra greeted her with a sleepy grin. You look happy, she teased. Andrea brushed off the comment with a playful shrug, though her face glowed. I am happy. Then she bid Mrs. Chen good night and settled in with Sierra, an unspoken newness in her eyes. Life kept pushing forward, ticking off days and weeks, but a steady warmth had taken root in her heart, promising that what they were building, both at work and beyond, was worth every challenge they had overcome. As the Foundation's pilot progressed, Andrea found herself diving deeper into operations, coordinating mentorships, handling financial disbursements, and tracking student progress. Her own coursework neared completion, setting her on track to graduate from the community college with honors. Each day felt like a marathon of responsibilities, yet she found strength in the knowledge that Sierra was stable and thriving, and that Nathan's support remained unwavering. But not all storms had passed. Warner, emboldened by a minor slump in the new product's sales forecast, reignited his campaign to scrutinize every expense. He circulated internal memos suggesting that the Foundation wasn't yielding enough tangible return. While he lacked the immediate leverage to shut it down, his tactics ramped up the pressure on Nathan, and by extension, Andrea. One afternoon, Andrea was reviewing scholarship applicants' mid-semester reports when her office phone rang. She picked up to hear Warner's clipped tone. Ms. Morgan, I'd like a progress report on those scholarship recipients, he said bluntly. Specifically, I want to know which ones have defaulted on academic requirements. She tried to keep her composure. We only have one student who's struggling to maintain the required GPA. We're offering tutoring support. There's no sign they'll drop out. Warner let out a skeptical grunt. I want the file by tomorrow morning. If they fail, it's a waste of company money. Her jaw clenched. Yes, sir, she managed, before he hung up abruptly. Tension coursed through her as she exited her office in search of Nathan. She found him in a smaller conference room, going over figures with a couple of department leads. His posture was stiff, the lines on his face deepened by stress. When he saw Andrea, he dismissed the others with a quick word. Let me guess, he said tiredly. Warner's on your case again. She nodded, handing him a printed copy of the email chain. He wants detailed reports on every student. He's looking for any slip-up. Nathan skimmed the pages, lips pressed into a tight line. He's trying to gather ammunition against the Foundation. Andrea sighed. I know. I'm worried he might find something trivial and blow it out of proportion. Nathan set the papers down and met her gaze. We'll keep everything transparent. The Foundation doesn't have skeletons in the closet, so if he wants to dig, let him. Just be prepared to defend our students. Her chest tightened with protective anger. I will. Outside that conference room, the sense of an approaching storm loomed large. Andrea doubled down on her work, documenting every aspect of the pilot program with meticulous care. She provided the files Warner demanded, ensuring there was no room for misinterpretation. Meanwhile, the personal bond between Andrea and Nathan continued to grow, even under stress. On a particularly rough evening, she found a note on her desk. Meet me on the rooftop at 8. After finishing her tasks, she followed the cryptic message to discover Nathan waiting under the night sky with 2 cups of steaming coffee. The city lights sparkled in the distance, a breathtaking backdrop to a stolen moment of peace. Sometimes you just need fresh air, he said. offering her a cup. She took it, inhaling the warm aroma. "Thank you," she whispered, stepping closer so they stood side by side, arms touching. For a few minutes they let the quiet wash over them, a reprieve from the clamor of deadlines and corporate battles. Eventually he turned, eyes searching hers. "You've been carrying so much. How are you holding up?" Andrea exhaled, leaning into him. "Honestly, I'm exhausted, but I'm not giving up. We're making a difference, and that's what matters." He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, the warmth of his gesture fueling her resolve. "We'll get through this," he murmured. "I promise." Yet beneath the solace of that moment, a flicker of uncertainty remained. Andrea knew Warner wouldn't rest until he found a way to undermine the foundation or tarnish Nathan's leadership. With each new memo, each pointed inquiry, the risk of losing everything they'd built grew more real. Still, as she gazed at the city lights, Andrea refused to let fear dictate her choices. Even if the storms kept rolling in, she would stand tall, alongside Nathan, alongside Sierra, alongside the students whose futures depended on the scholarship. In her heart, she felt the beginnings of a new conviction. No matter how high the stakes, she would fight to the end to ensure that hope prevailed. Winter's chill set in. Matching the frosty corporate environment, Warner pushed for a mandatory review of the foundation's finances, forcing Andrea and Nathan to present every detail, again, to the board. Despite the tension, the scholarship students were thriving. Monthly progress reports showed most recipients excelling academically, and a few had even secured internships related to their fields of study. As the review approached, Andrea worked tirelessly to compile success stories, testimonies from students, photos of them attending workshops, and thank you letters expressing how the scholarship changed their lives. She believed if the board could see the genuine impact on real people, they might think twice before cutting the program entirely. On the morning of the review, Nathan and Andrea arrived early to set up. They arranged large printed charts and assembled a slideshow featuring short video clips of scholarship recipients speaking about their experiences. Andrea's stomach churned with nerves, but she reminded herself that every word they'd present was backed by truth. When the board meeting began, Warner struck first. He demanded to see evidence of clear returns on investment. "Feel-good stories won't pay our bills," he declared, glaring at Andrea. "If these students aren't translating into tangible benefits for the company, we should redirect resources." Nathan stood, addressing the room. "Let's be honest. Not every investment pays off in the short term. Sometimes, building a stronger community and workforce is the ultimate win. And that's why this foundation matters." He gestured for Andrea to start the presentation. She clicked through slides highlighting the students' journeys. Each testimonial resonated with gratitude and ambition, painting a vivid picture of the real people behind the statistics. The board members watched intently, some leaning forward with interest, others wearing guarded expressions. Warner looked unimpressed, arms crossed over his chest. Then came a moment of tension. One of the videos featured a student who had recently struggled to maintain her GPA, the same case Warner had singled out. Andrea held her breath as the student explained how the foundation's tutoring program helped her get back on track. She ended her testimonial with, "I'm determined to succeed because someone believed in me when no one else would." A pin-drop silence followed. Andrea could see flickers of emotion in the eyes of a few board members. Warner, however, remained stony-faced. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. "That's compelling," he said. "We appreciate the thorough documentation." Warner couldn't resist a dig. "Emotional pleas aside, our quarterly profits are marginally down, and we need to recoup." Nathan's jaw tightened. "We're addressing profitability through other channels." The foundation's budget is minuscule compared to overall spending. Cutting it would be inconsequential to profit margins, but devastating to our credibility and these students' futures. Silence reigned again as the board processed Nathan's words. Then an unexpected ally spoke up, an older board member who'd been quiet throughout most meetings. "I've watched this company grow over the years. I've seen expansions, acquisitions, and philanthropic gestures come and go. This foundation, however, seems different. It has real potential to cultivate loyalty and future talent. I, for one, support giving it continued breathing room." Several other members nodded in agreement. Warner looked incredulous, but he was outnumbered. The chairman concluded the review by thanking Andrea and Nathan for the updates. "We will maintain the foundation's current funding and reevaluate at the next annual session," he announced. "For now, we see value in continuing the pilot." When the meeting adjourned, Andrea could barely contain her relief. She exchanged a quick, triumphant glance with Nathan. Warner brushed past them in a hurry, clearly displeased. It wasn't a complete, unconditional victory, but the foundation had survived yet another test. Back in Nathan's office, the tension broke. He pulled Andrea into a swift hug, the unspoken fears and hopes crashing into that brief embrace. "You were amazing," he murmured. "Those videos, the students' testimonies, it all made a difference." She felt tears prick her eyes. "It was a team effort," she said, voice unsteady. "But this means everything to me, and to them." He leaned back, hands still resting on her shoulders. "The board has given us another chance. Next time they see the results, maybe we'll have an even stronger case, and more students succeeding." Andrea nodded, wiping at a stray tear. "Oh, we will," she promised, thinking of the countless hours they'd poured into making this dream a reality. Victory was never guaranteed, but step by step, they were proving that compassion and business could coexist. Late that night, after Andrea returned home to Sierra's playful grin and a quick dinner, she found herself journaling about the day's events. She recognized how far she'd come from that frightened janitor, desperate to keep her sister out of foster care. Now, she was helping others find their own foothold in life, and through it all, she'd discovered a sense of purpose and possibly a future with someone who believed in her as fiercely as she believed in him. Nearly 2 years later, the frosty tension and near-constant battles at Cross Innovations had evolved into something more stable. The product that once seemed doomed had become moderately successful, its reputation bolstered by the company's growing image as a socially responsible player in the tech world. The foundation, still modest, was firmly established. Every quarter, new students received scholarships, mentorships, and glimpses of a brighter future. Andrea had completed her associate degree with honors and was now studying part-time for her bachelor's in business administration. Balancing work, classes, and foundation responsibilities remained challenging, but each challenge felt meaningful. Sierra, now 16, thrived in high school, her once rebellious phase tempered by a new sense of stability and ambition. During a late spring afternoon, Andrea attended a small ceremony celebrating the latest scholarship cohort's achievements. She spoke from the heart about resilience and the power of education. Applause rang out as she finished, and she felt a warm presence at her side. Nathan slipped an arm around her shoulders, beaming with pride. That evening, he proposed they take a walk through Central Park, a cherished ritual they'd developed. The city lights flickered beyond the trees, but Andrea focused on Nathan's voice as he spoke about the future of the foundation. "We're helping more students than ever," he said, the excitement clear. "And with the board gradually coming around, we might be able to expand next year." Andrea nodded, savoring the sound of his optimism. "It's amazing how far we've come. Sometimes I still can't believe it." They strolled beside a quiet pond, the moon's reflection shimmering on the water. Nathan paused, turning to face her, and his eyes held a tender glow she'd come to adore. "I have something to ask you," he said softly. Her heart quickened. "What is it?" He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Time seemed to slow as he opened it, revealing a simple yet elegant ring. "Andrea Morgan," he began, voice wavering slightly, "you came into my life by chance, and you changed it in ways I never expected. You've shown me that success is empty, without purpose, and that caring for others is worth every risk. Will you marry me?" Tears instantly blurred her vision. She let out a shaky laugh, overwhelmed by gratitude, relief, and love. "Yes," she whispered, voice cracking. "Yes, of course." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced, the soft hum of city life around them fading into irrelevance. In that moment, every setback, every argument, every sleepless night felt like it had led them here, to a promise of a shared tomorrow. Andrea pressed her forehead to Nathan's, breathing in the reality of this commitment, her heart soaring. News of their engagement spread quickly through Cross Innovations and the Foundation's network. While some tabloids turned it into a cliché headline, "Billionaire boss marries former janitor," the overwhelming response was one of delight. Many employees had witnessed their struggles firsthand, cheering at a love story that had blossomed in the midst of corporate chaos. Over the months that followed, they carefully planned a small, intimate wedding in Central Park. Andrea's graduation from the community college served as the prelude. On the day she walked the stage to receive her diploma, Nathan stood among the cheering crowd, his pride evident. Sierra was there too, snapping photos with a grin so wide it could have lit up the auditorium. Shortly after, on a sunny autumn afternoon, they gathered in a secluded corner of the park. Close friends, family, and a handful of scholarship students who had become part of their extended circle attended. Andrea wore a simple white gown, her hair braided with delicate flowers. Sierra stood by her side as maid of honor, looking poised and confident in a pale lavender dress. Nathan waited near a small floral arch, hands folded, the vow he'd prepared shining in his eyes. The ceremony was brief, but deeply heartfelt. They exchanged promises to support each other's dreams, to lift each other in times of doubt, and to keep pushing forward with the Foundation's mission. Sierra read a short poem she wrote, voice cracking with emotion as she spoke of gratitude and second chances. Even the crisp autumn breeze seemed to hush in reverence. When Nathan and Andrea sealed their vows with a kiss, applause and laughter rippled through the gathering. Cameras clicked, capturing the moment for the scrapbook of a lifetime. Tears gleamed on Mrs. Chen's cheeks, and a few scholarship recipients waved from the back, wearing proud smiles. Afterward, Andrea and Nathan walked hand in hand through the park, greeting guests and snapping photos. In the distance, the city skyline stood tall, a reminder of the place where their journey began and the challenges they'd conquered. The Foundation continued to grow under Andrea's leadership. She coordinated more robust programs, forging partnerships with community colleges across the state. Nathan managed the tech empire, ensuring the board recognized the intangible returns on their philanthropic venture. Sierra, inspired by her sister's success, worked hard in school, already talking about potential scholarships for her own future. Together, they had built a life that honored both their personal bond and the mission that had brought them together. As the sun dipped lower, bathing the park in a golden glow, Andrea paused beside Nathan, heart brimming with contentment. She remembered the night he first overheard her desperate phone call, the moment that sparked everything. Now two souls, once defined by struggle, had found hope and partnership in each other, forging a path neither could have imagined alone. With leaves rustling underfoot, they smiled at each other, the final image of their wedding day etched in memory, a testament to love that grew from empathy, ambition guided by compassion, and a shared desire to help others find a brighter tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.